Ladies and gentlemen, please not make any noise during the rally.
The score above Court 3 in Melbourne on January 19th read 6-0. 6 games to 0.
Coming into the tournament, I knew that the competition was super strong.
Alex Eala had walked Alycia Parks off the court in the first set of a Grand Slam first round without dropping a game, without coughing up a break, without letting the bigger, older American find a rhythm on her serve. And then, for reasons the box score cannot fully explain, the match turned. In the second set, Parks hit 12 aces. 12! On the kind of hard court that rewards a serve like hers if the player can stay calm long enough to use it. Parks stayed calm. Eala, 21 years old and playing only her second Grand Slam main draw, did not. That single set, the 0-6 that wasn't, the 6-3 that couldn't have been, the final frame that decided everything, is the hinge this story turns on. Because both of those women are now confirmed for Cincinnati. The draw lands in 5 days. If the bracket falls a certain way, the scoreboard gets the sequel the tennis internet has been waiting on since January. The head-to-head between Alex Eala and Alycia Parks is 1 match long, and 1 match into her career, Parks leads it. That single result came at a Grand Slam under a pro-Eala crowd against a rising opponent who had just taken her apart for 36 minutes. It is the kind of loss a 21-year-old either carries or converts. 7 months later, Eala sits at WTA number 20 in the world, her best ranking ever, the first Filipina to occupy that band of the standings, locked in after a title run in Washington that closed with 9 straight games won. Cincinnati runs August 13th through 23rd. Both names are on the entry list. The draw releases somewhere around August 10th. Until then, this is a story about a rivalry with 1 match on file and a setup for a second. 2 problems sit across the net from each other in this story, and they don't sit there the same way. For Alex Eala, the question is finishing. She is built for the kind of tennis that wins openers and stretches sets, left-handed, fast to the ball, willing to reset a rally 6, 7, 8 times. In Melbourne, she showed the full package for the first set and then ran into Alycia Parks' serve. The kind of serve that takes the ball out of rallies entirely and watched the match leave her game. 7 months later, in the Mubadala DC Open Final, she won 9 consecutive games to close world number 3, Jessica Pegula. The finishing skill that vanished in January showed up in August. The question is whether that gap between 6-0 dominance and 6-0 collapse has actually been closed. For Alycia Parks, the question is leverage. Parks hit a career-high ranking of number 40 in August 2023 after winning the Hobart International. In 2026, she sits at 71 with a 22-23 win-loss ledger and 0 titles on the year. The serve is still elite. The stat is a record. Athens 2026 produced a quarterfinal against Maria Sakkari. Washington produced qualifier wins. The player is still capable. The room she's rebuilding toward is harder to find this time around. A statement win over a top 20 opponent at the kind Eala has become would be more than a season highlight. It would be a recalibration. Neither problem is the other's villain. They're mirror problems, and they explain each other. Alycia Parks broke down in tears between games in the second set of that Australian Open first round. Broadcast cameras caught it. Sports writers on site described it. The crowd around her was heavily pro-Eala, and a player trying to find her own serve rhythm under that pressure can lose the match in her head before she loses it on the scoreboard.
Ladies and gentlemen, please not make any noise during the rally.
Parks did the opposite thing. She played through it. The numbers behind the comeback tell the answer. In the first set, Parks hit 0 aces and faced more break points than she saved. In sets 2 and 3, she hit 12 aces, won 50% of her first serve points, and converted 4 of 17 break points, a stat that is unglamorous on paper but more than enough to finish a 0-6 hole. She double faulted 10 times across the match. She still won. That is resilience with a serve. which is the most dangerous combination in tennis, and the texture matters. Eala's first set looked like a young player who had arrived. Her movement was clean, her point construction deliberate, her court sense already a step ahead. The 6-0 set without a dropped game in a tour-level match on a Grand Slam. Court against a player 6'1" who hits a bigger ball than she does is a true declaration. The second set said, declarations without finish are not titles. There is a difference between winning a set and winning a match. Tennis has known this for a century, but every player discovers it for herself. The discovery is not a thought. It is a body sensation. The moment the legs get quieter, the breath gets tighter, and the muscle memory stops being muscle memory and starts being decision-making. Eala lived that moment in Melbourne and did not survive it. The rest of her season is the question of whether she could survive the next one. The answer so far is yes. The numbers from Washington tell the second half of the story. In the DC Open Final on August 3, 2026, Eala lost the first set 4-6 to top seed Jessica Pegula. She won the second 6-4, she won the third 6-0, and finished by winning 9 games in a row. The scoreline is not the inverse of Melbourne. She was the one coming from behind this time, and she did not just come back, she closed the door. The match produced a quote the WTA transcript captured cleanly. When asked how she held it together during the closing stretch,
I was so nervous.
Eala said she was so nervous that the wrists were shaking and that she let the nerves stay. That sentence is a different player than the one who let her composure slip in January. The technical difference between a 6-0 set at the Australian Open and a 6-0 set at the DC Open is not small. One is collapse, the other is release. The same scoreline across 2 events in the same calendar year is the scar tissue of a 21-year-old's growth. The ranking refresh confirms the trajectory. After the DC Open title, Eala jumped to a career-high WTA number 20, 8 places into a band that 3 years ago would have seemed unreachable from the Philippines. She is the first Filipina in that band. That sentence should not be repeated more than it has to be. It is true, and it is recent, and it will be in the record book for a long time. But the more durable news is the technical and mental scaffolding Eala has rebuilt since January. Both players are confirmed on the Cincinnati Open 2026 entry list. Eala's appearance was flagged months in advance when the tournament announced its singles field. Parks' spot came on the strength of her ranking inside the cutoff. The main draw is 96 players over 10 days at the Lindner Family Tennis Center in Mason, Ohio, with a tournament purse of more than $7 million. For context, that prize money commitment is bigger than the entire season purse of any WTA 250 event on the calendar. This is not a 125 tournament where Parks can grind a qualifier or 2 and hope. This is the second largest hardcourt event in North America before the US Open, if the draw section sends them toward each other, and this is the part the script must hedge until the bracket is published. The rematch would arrive at the exact stage of Eala's season when the finishing muscle is freshly trained, and the exact stage of Parks' season when the comeback build is documented. A 6-0 set is in both their memories. Parks erased 1, Eala has now produced 2. The collision would not be the same match twice, it would be the same scoreline applied by both players in different directions. Jessica Pegula, then ranked number 3 in the world, lost the DC Open Final 4-6, 6-4, 6-0. In her post-match comments carried by Yahoo Sports and the major wire services, Pegula called Eala not fun to play against. That sentence is not a compliment and not a complaint. It is a peer describing an opponent she could not solve. Pegula is a multi-time Grand Slam semifinalist, a top 3 player on a year-long basis, and the highest-ranked American on tour. Her assessment, hours after the loss, is the closest thing to a peer review the WTA currently produces. The WTA's own Champions Corner interview series added the next layer. Eala, in her own words on video the day after the title, "I feel all the love." That sentence is small, and it is also the most important thing she has said in 2026. It places the work, the grinding, the year-long rebuild from a Hobart-era trajectory to a Washington title, inside the context she is most accountable to: the people watching, the Filipino diaspora that fills her stands, the family in Mallorca checking her phone. The third voice belongs to Alycia Parks herself, and it is in her body language rather than her press transcript. In Melbourne, when the cameras closed in on her face between the first and second sets, the tears were visible. She did not speak publicly at length about that match in the days after. The comeback that followed was her statement. The statement is not a quote, it is a 6-3 set won after a 6-0 set lost. The room Eala just walked into matters more than the door she walked through to get there. The WTA Top 20 in late 2026 includes Aryna Sabalenka at the top, Iga Świątek in the conversation, Jessica Pegula at 3, Elena Rybakina after a strong swing, Madison Keys inside the band, Coco Gauff a few slots back, Jasmine Paolini in there, and now, after August 5th, Alexandra Eala at 20. That is not a ranking number. It is direct entry into every Masters level event on the calendar. It is unfettered access to the seeding band. It is, in practical terms, the difference between playing a top 10 player as a wild card hopeful and playing one as a seeded opponent with full preparation runway. There is also a U.S. Open implication that the numbers do not hide. The entry list for the season's final Grand Slam was published this week. Eala is among the players seeded directly into the main draw. The Cincinnati Open is the last hard-court tune-up before Flushing Meadows. For Parks, a deep run in Ohio would change the seeding conversation around her in a week. For Eala, the Cincinnati week is the test of whether the DC Open was a breakout or a destination. That distinction, breakout or destination, is the stakes question. Breakouts are fragile. They depend on confidence and crowd. Destinations are structural. They depend on serve percentages won under pressure, return games held, and the ability to win 9 in a row when the legs say stop. The Melbourne match said, not yet. The Washington match said, maybe. The Cincinnati match, if the draw delivers it, will say. A second measurable variable sits beside ranking prize money. Eala's 2026 earnings are above $1.5 million, a number that was unthinkable from Philippine tennis 12 months ago. Parks' 2026 earnings are just over $760,000. Both of those numbers reflect what each player has been able to convert at the events she's reached. The dollar gap is also a competitive gap, and the Cincinnati purse, combined with the rankings points on offer, can either widen that gap or close it. The loss is still on the record. Australian Open 2026 first round 0-6, 6-3, 6-2. Alexandra Eala led a Grand Slam first-round match against a server who would finish the year ranked around 70, won the first set 6-0, and did not win the match. That sentence is not spoken often enough about 21-year-olds because the temptation is always to talk about the win after the loss and skip the loss itself. But the architecture of the 7 months that followed, Birmingham 125 title, DC Open 250 title ranking jump from outside the top 50 to 20, cannot be understood without the hinge it built on. The hinge was a 6'1" American who hit 12 aces in 2 sets and a Filipino left-hander who, for 90 minutes in the second and third sets, could not solve any of them. Eala did not give a long, on-record remark about the Melbourne loss. The recovery happened on court, not in a press conference. That is the strongest statement a young player can make, to let the next tournament be the answer to the last one. The room is the scene. The WTA Top 20 is the address. Walk through the names with her: Sabalenka, Świątek, Pegula, Rybakina, Keys, Gauff, Paolini, Eala. None of those players gave her the entry. She earned it on the same kind of hard court where Alycia Parks handed her a lesson in January, in a final against the third-ranked player in the world, by winning 9 games in a row when the match asked her whether she could finish one. If Cincinnati's draw places Parks and Eala on a collision course, and the bracket is published in 5 days, and the script cannot promise what the bracket will say, the second match will be played in a different room than the first. Eala walked into round 1 of a Grand Slam that day. She is walking into round 2 of a Masters tournament now. The finishing skill is documented. The comeback nerve is documented in her opponent, too. There is a number that keeps surfacing as this story is told. 12. Parks hit 12 aces in the match. She was supposed to be out of 6. Eala produced 2 6-love sets. In 2026, won a memory that became a motivation and won a record that became a ranking. 9. 9 consecutive games to close a top 3 opponent on a Monday night in Washington. Those 3 numbers are not a forecast. They are the data the second match would be played on. The scoreboard in Cincinnati, if it follows the story the game has been writing since Melbourne, will read a different ending than the last one. The documentary footnote is owed. This rivalry is not framed as villain versus hero. Alycia Parks is a credible opponent with a top 40 ceiling and the temperament to come back from 0 to 6 against a hostile crowd. Alexandra Eala is a 21-year-old who rebuilt her closing game in 7 months and now shares a room with the best players on tour. The tennis decides the rest of it.